Bogs have earned some odd names over the years: mosses and mires, flothers and flows. Damp and dreary mist seems to have hung over the mires and rushy pastures of Northumberland for centuries. At best, bogs were useful as a source of fuel. Farmers and shepherds dug the peat from the waterlogged ground and used it for burning on the winter fires in their cottages. Because rain in these hills falls more quickly than it can drain away, the stems and leaves of dead plants lie soaking in the ground and never rot. Over the years, layer upon layer of vegetation have been pressed together to form beds and blankets of peat. Farming families made good use of the peat beds close to their hill settlements. They cut the peats in sections and laid them out to dry. Then the peats were stacked, ready to be carried down into the valley. At one or two places in the Northumberland hills, peat for fuel is still dug in this way. But it's hard work, and peat beds within easy reach of the farms have been worked out. Carrying loads of peat down steep slopes from distant hillsides by horse-drawn sledge was only worthwhile when there was no other way of winning fuel. But apart from peat for cottage fires, bogs were regarded as good for nothing. In fact, they had an evil reputation. Here in the border hills, people following forgotten trackways or taking shortcuts could disappear without trace. In the wild country north of the Roman wall, even cattle drovers feared for their lives. This lonely cottage on a knoll above the border mires is called Burn Divot. On a bright sunny afternoon, it looks as if it must have been a happy and homely place, a perfect refuge for the drovers travelling south from the high hills. But the story of Burn Divot has a sinister twist. The light in its window guided lost travellers to their deaths. The lady of the house welcomed visitors, then murdered them in their sleep. It was unwise to cross the wastes at night or alone. But with a settled border and a boom in trade during the 18th and 19th centuries, farming began to extend out of the valleys and over the hills. The edges of the mires were pushed further and further into the troughs and hollows. Farmers cut drainage channels to dry out the land, and bog moss was soon replaced by moor grass or molinia. Sheep grazed across rolling prairies in the wide open landscape of the Northumberland hills. In the present century, the patchwork of bogs has shrunk still further, especially with the arrival of more efficient mechanised methods and the planting of new spruce forests. Trees are thirsty neighbours, so even the scraps of wet ground within the forests dried up and disappeared, and the great border mires passed out of living memory. They may have scared generations of travellers and been cursed by farmers, but there was another side to the mires. They could be places of rare beauty. Their wildlife communities were unique. It's only in the past few years that people have realised the significance of the mires, their landscape and conservation value. Northumberland National Park has been at the forefront of research and management. Landowners who'd spent decades draining the moors and pastures were encouraged to take a new look at what was being lost: cotton grass, bog asphodel, the large heath butterfly and the curlew. Suddenly the race was on to save the border mires. The National Park contains some of the finest surviving bogs in Britain. But although these bogs are of international importance, very few of them are completely untouched. Most have been damaged by attempts to drain them, or have been left to dry out as the surrounding countryside has been put to use. Each summer the water level is monitored and changes in plant communities are surveyed. It's surprising how quickly the mires are coming back to life. Successful management means encouraging the water level to rise so that the surface feels as soggy as a wet sponge. Old drains are dammed, so more water is held in the peat. Trees are cut down. This is a far cry from the days when folk believed that bogs were ugly, dangerous places. Today, when people cross the border hills, they're more likely to be walking the Pennine Way than stealing cattle. And the only damage is to the precious surface of the peat. Positive management encourages walkers to follow the causey slabs, rather than wading through the morass of churned-up peat. All this has helped to preserve the spirit of the border mires, to keep them as an important part of the landscape. The mires are no longer as extensive as they once were. Times have changed, and the era of border wars and wilderness is over. What we have left is a patchwork in a new wilderness of prairie and forest. The great beauty of bogs lies in their imagery and setting. But the bright tracery of flowers will always hide a cold heart.